Hey everybody, my name is Michael James Ott, and it is Tuesday, May 7th in 2019, and this is the Pro and the Con Show, and I'm your host. The purpose of the show is to spend some time talking about the issues and trying to ferret out the bias from the facts, so separate the wheat from the chaff, if you will. And this is something that's an ongoing issue. And so what I am doing and proposing that you would do is to look at multiple sources of news. I know it takes some extra time, but it's better to be fully informed. And the quick analogy is, you look at a used car and you want to know whether the transmission is good or bad, and because it makes a big difference as to how you perceive the value of that car, so the decisions that you make around it, right? So what I'm doing is I've got 5 different websites, so from left leaning to kind of less or unbiased mostly to right leaning, and the 5 examples I'm using, you can choose others if you like, but the Huffington Post on the left, CNN, NPR, which National Public Radio has a website, and then Fox News, and then on the full right, Breitbart News. And right now, I'm showing the center page here, so this is NPR. And their headline actually is on a issue where a person was arrested and eventually led to her death in jail, apparently. And I haven't actually read that story because as I go through the headlines, so we're still fighting over the Mueller report and some of the things going on with that, and now the Republicans and the Democrats are really at loggerheads. Okay, no surprise there. There are loggerheads over this thing. So President Trump and the Republicans are basically saying we're not going to submit to any more investigation on the Russian stuff and obstruction of justice. We're simply just going to not accept the subpoenas and stuff that Congress is issuing. They're basically saying no. You're just going to have to go to the courts and see whether you can get relief in that way or form. And so the latest one in the Huffington Post, of course, has a big bold title on it, is this attorney for Trump, McGahn. He was the White House attorney. He is no longer in government service, yet the current White House staff is telling him to ignore the subpoenas for his information that he has. So this is, kind of the thing that goes on. And so that's so rather than go through some of the shows, I kind of go through and I look at some of the headlines, and we see how they treat the headlines differently, and they put in more emotional kinds of things in some of the headlines, depending on what their bent is, what their bias is, what they're trying to support, their agenda. But fundamentally, this loggerheads between Republicans and Democrats, this is more a fundamental issue, and I'm an engineer by training, and what we're always doing is we're always, as engineers, looking for the fundamental or root cause of the issue, as opposed to trying to treat symptoms of a problem. And a lot of what we do in this country, a lot of the laws and everything that we do are symptoms. We're putting Band-Aids on things. And so here's a very simple analogy. So a man walks into a doctor's office and he's hitting himself in the head with a hammer. And he talks to the doctor and says, "Doc, you got to help me. I am having terrible headaches." And the doctor says, "Well, here, take some aspirin and go home." Okay, now it's a simple, very simple example, but it illustrates that that's the wrong advice, right? The doctor should say, well, did you ever think about stopping hitting your head with a hammer? Did you ever consider that you don't want to hit your head with a hammer anymore? And then there's a good chance your headaches would go away. And in our case, we have these two political parties, and they're the root cause of so much of all the things that most Americans don't like about our government. And why is that? Well, it turns out basically there's this one group of people, and they're fairly wealthy, and they enjoy being wealthy and influential. And there's another group of people, and they enjoy being wealthy and influential, and they, it's a contest for them. Okay, you've got these type A individuals. So type A's are very aggressive. They want to win. They want to succeed. And so there's, and so this group has certain leanings or tendencies or general views, and this group has others. And they basically play, they try to do the puppet string thing on us, you and I, the rest of us in America. So there's 340 million of us or something, and there's some hundreds of people on both sides of this that are causing all this hate and discontent. And it all comes down, and so you talk about the attack ads that you hate so much. Everybody hates them. I that's pretty much universal complaint, right? And you talk about things like this where, come on, just share information and get this done, or don't, but just let's just stop this stupid partisan banging of heads. And so the parties, and it was interesting because I was reading up on the Constitution, and they had a little bit of history around the Constitution, and one of the things that they said, and I haven't read this elsewhere to verify it, but according to this one source, they said that one of the reasons why George Washington, was unwilling to extend his term as president is that political parties had started to rise up in America, and already he could not stand the infighting that was going on amongst these political parties, and he wanted to wash his hands of it, and so he stepped away from the political environment. And so even back then, so back in 1790 or whatever it was, 1800, back in that time frame, this whole issue was already, coming to the fore. So to cure the issue, okay, so address the source. And the source is we have depended on these political parties to basically pick candidates for us to vote for and to promote them and stuff like that. And okay, 200 years ago, 100 years ago, this capability of people to communicate, the ability to share information was really, really bad, right? I mean, 150 years ago, everything was on horseback, and information was almost, so you had this, you almost had to have some kind of mechanism, because individuals could not be informed and stay informed with any timeliness at all. And so you do the best that you can. Well, hey, it's 2019, and guess what? We have computers that are unbelievably capable, and we have, all kinds of capabilities of software and the internet, with basically instantaneous transfer of information pretty much anywhere around the globe or wherever we want it sent. And so the thought I have is that we, us, the 340 million of us, that no longer really want to be puppeteers and are tired of the political infighting and the partisanship and all this other stuff. Well, we can take care of that. And the way we would take care of it is to basically amend the Constitution to have more direct input into selection of candidates for our election cycles. And what I'm about to tell you about is really kind of a mashup of some ideas that myself and some of my friends have talked about over the course of months or whatever. So just think of it as use a kind of a modern term, a mashup of like jury duty, and how jurors are kind of volunteered randomly to participate in that system, with kind of an online system like Facebook, which I'm talking to you right now on Facebook Live. So a depository of information and stuff that's readily searched and viewed. And then with the election cycle, the actual elections. So if you think about, you bring those three elements together, what would you have? And to help clarify the thing, because I can sit here and kind of wave my hands and say, well, what about this or what about that? I've, in my experience of working 35 years in various positions in different companies, and also 5 years in the Navy, having some kind of proposal, a straw man that people can look over, is better than, because it gives them something that you can look at and say, well, I don't like this, I don't like that, but it's a starting point, and it's something that you can look at and get to know it better. So actually what I did is, again, straw man kind of thing, I've taken a shot at drafting the 28th Amendment to the Constitution. So there's currently 27 amendments, and they're all, actually most of the amendments are quite short. Probably the longest of them is maybe 300 or 400 words, and I will fully confess that this thing is more like 1,200 words. But I think there's a significant difference here, because it doesn't matter. I mean, the amendment, there's no constitutional limit on how long they can be. They're just typically fairly short, because a lot of things are simple, like if you're 18, you're allowed to vote. Well, how many words does it take to express that? Not many, right? And there's other similar things like that in the amendments. But this one, because we're basically wanting to establish this new system and with some specifics in it, it's longer, so that if we actually pass this thing, if you and I, the 340 million of us, demand that this sort of thing, something like this anyway, were enacted, then there's sufficient detail there that Congress can't twist it into something that we don't want anymore. Okay, so I'm just going to hit the highlights of this thing. So that the framework, I've actually got quite a bit of detail here, but the framework is, we the people believe that government should act in the best interests of the people in general. Okay, and we believe that our fellow citizens, when they're employees of the government, whether they're appointed or elected, they should serve the interests of the people of this nation in totality, and not serve the interests of coalitions or small groups or industry. And so there's some terms here. So we basically end up, a lot of people are excited about doing like a term limit thing. Well, so I've kind of put that in here. So because of this new system, it's going to be relatively easy for a candidate to come into this system and get the information that they had from the previous office holder or position holder. And so there's, and the limits are, the number of years is pretty much the same. So 4 years for president or vice president, senator, 6 years, and so on. But the key thing being that they pretty much are limited to one term. They are elected, and then that's it. So they're not going to spend what politicians do right now. One of the big problems is they get into office the first time, and then they spend all of their time trying to be reelected again. And they're not serving the people. They're just trying to get reelected, and it's crazy. So then how do these candidates come to be? Well, just like jury duty, so now there's databases the government has of taxpayers, tax rolls basically, and they can go into that database just like they do for jury duty, and they can say, okay, anyone over age 25 in the state, here's the names, and randomly select 10, let's say. And those 10 people are going to be available on a national, this is for federal government, so on a national database. Those 10 people will be put in there, and and the ones that are 35 and older, for example, would be potentially eligible to be a candidate for the office of president eventually. And so how would it work? Well, the various people are put in there for each state, and then once they'll be notified, just like in jury duty, and you can say, okay, I'd be willing to participate as a representative, or I'd be willing to participate as a senator or as president, or all three. I mean, you could check any box that applies, and you would insert a bunch of information like my name, or the name and the address, and all that kind of stuff, work history, a bunch of background stuff into the system. And what will happen is, based on education and capabilities and work history and so on, some candidates will kind of percolate higher than others. And anyway, so then there would be phases of elections where the voters would go into the system, and they would see the information on these candidates, very standardized information, not polished, produced information, but very standardized stuff. And so there'd be a kind of a first wave where they would be kind of ranked, and then some number of them, say the top 3 or 4 for each post in the state, and 5 or 6 or something for the president. They would go into another election, and the candidates would put in more information into the system, the secure national system, and then with maybe some town hall videos and these kinds of things, and that would then the result of that election would be 2 candidates, and then again another phase, and this is just occurring over a series of months in phases, and then the final phase would be electing the actual officials, choices from the final 2 from the previous efforts. So no big money being spent on television ads, no attack ads or anything like that. In fact, the candidates would be specifically barred from saying anything about the other candidates. They're just promoting themselves and talking about themselves and their own capabilities, and that basically would be it. And so and there's obviously a lot of stuff in here, but every election cycle, you would just go through this process, and the number of or candidates, and then they would be sworn in. And there is one last thing I want to cover here, and that is I would have every government employee make an oath to office. If you're in a government position, you're supposed to be serving the people of the United States of America. And, and so you should have some definition and some oath in the solemn oath and embracing that very noble commitment. So, and these are the words that I would choose, but, maybe someone else would choose otherwise. That's fine. Again, just a straw man, right? So I acknowledge and embrace my duties to serve the people. I shall serve and protect the people of the United States in totality against all enemies, foreign and domestic, to the best of my abilities. From this day forward, I shall not accept gifts, future employment, or other forms of compensation from any source that could be perceived to influence my service to the people. When or where there is a conflict of interest, I will publicly declare any conflicts known to me and serve the people over my own interests or the interests of coalitions, groups, political parties, or industry. I acknowledge and embrace that service to the citizens of this country is a solemn and noble commitment. My failure to serve the people with integrity, fairness, and compassion can be grounds for Congress or the Department of Justice representing the people to charge me with treason, the penalties for treason being harsh, including penalty of death if so ordered by a jury of my peers. And so I'm suggesting that every single January, any employee of the federal government would, elected or appointed in any way, shape, or form, would take that oath. And again, the purpose being eliminate all this stuff. And what you would find is you could get rid of all of this politicking and get down to working on the issues and evolving our governance. Because the other thing that's always true, of course, is that the government, for the most part, is set, right? We're not, every time there's a new election, we're not tossing out every single law that we have and starting over. We're just changing it. We're tweaking the overall set of governance for us. So, in that environment, people coming in, they don't need to have 25 years of experience bickering with other people or arguing or politicizing various issues. It's just, hey, we're here to serve the people. Here's the information on this issue. It feels like we need to change something. Let's talk as people serving the people. How do we fix this? All right, so this has been the Pro and Con Show for Tuesday, May 7th. Hope you enjoyed it wherever you are around the world, if you've had the chance to watch this. And I'll be making another video tomorrow of this topic or some other related topic to the news or to the truth. Thanks for watching.